age-old problems with all companies, right? Whether it be startups or it be like bigger organizations, is to determine the product market fit, right? Whether there is a market for the product they are planning to spend their money on, right? Because if they spend a lot of money and create a product and there is no market for that product, all that money is in a way sunk cost, right? It's a wasted money, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you suggest that this exploration can be done to find if there is a product, if there is a market for the product you're working on in a systematic manner?
Yeah. I mean, look, the word there that caused my spidey senses to kind of tingle a bit was the word systematic, because the challenge is that it's not ever perfectly systematic. You can make it more systematic. You can make it a bit more intentional. You can be a bit more deliberate about what you're trying to do, and why you're going through each step in a process. But sometimes every framework or approach to product market fit that I've found, at a certain point where they try to say, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's the process, follow the process, here are the steps. People then start following the steps and they forget the whole reason why they're doing it in the first place, and it all falls flat. So that's the first thing I'd say. So to some degree, you have to accept that it is a little bit chaotic. And product market fit can vary in its difficulty. So if you're working in a really large enterprise company where you have a product that is quite mature and you're looking to build a feature and you want to make sure that feature itself has product market fit, but you have a very healthy user base, this is a very clear thing that you should be doing, it's kind of a no-brainer, then product market fit is much more a science or even just a process than it is an art. Whereas on the other hand, if you're looking for something in a much more exploratory area where you have less knowledge, in general, it's completely new, you're working with new technologies, all of these things add a lot of complexity. And in those cases there, what you're looking at is much, much more difficult. And so the process you'll take in both cases may be somewhat similar, but you will find that you will hit way more problems in that second example than you would the first. So I definitely found working as a product manager, the first few problems I worked on were probably a lot simpler in terms of product market fit. It was more, how do we solve this? How do we make sure this works? How do we make sure we don't build something super expensive or unusable or whatever? Whereas now I'm definitely moving more into that area where it's like, okay, is there a market for this? Although I have done that a few times over my career. So I guess I'll walk you through then, first of all, to give this some structure. Here are
Sure.
the things that you would do to try and find product market fit. And a lot of these things you could find quite easily doing a bit of Google searching. There's lots of books on it. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here, but what I will focus on is where people might fall flat or find things difficult, because it's very easy to read about a process and then you try and do it, then you realize, oh wow, this is why people get paid money to do this. It's not super easy. You can't just automate it away. So the general way you want to do it is you want to try and talk to customers first. So I always recommend talking to customers. I mean, look, I'm a data scientist by training. I love looking at data, and there's a place for that. And if you can find access to survey data or user data on either competitor products or your own products, that stuff's great. But talking to customers is something that should always be the top of your list when it comes to priorities for product market fit. If you don't understand what your users are doing and what their problems are, then you aren't really in a position to really convincingly speak to it or come up with ideas that are going to have that level of fit. But then the first problem people come up with that is they talk to people and people tell them what they want, and then they say, we're going to build this thing that person told us to build. And that's obviously a bit of a product 101 mistake, which is you shouldn't be listening to what people tell you what they want, because go to any of your friends and ask them what they would like in a partner, and then go see them 10 or 20 years down the line and see who they end up being with. It'll be nothing like the fantasy they had in their imagination. That's because when they started lifting off all the things they want in a partner, they're not prioritizing in any way. They're not saying, I really want to make sure that they are like reliable and that they have a really deep connection to me and we have shared values. They'll kind of talk about all the stuff they want, and there's no real sense of, well, actually, this is what matters. That would be nice, but honestly, I don't care. So understand where there's unmet needs rather than the things that they say they want. So if they say they want something like, okay, maybe someone's working with Excel and they say, look, when we work with Excel, we find VBA really difficult. So we'd love something that helps us write better VBA, because we find it really confusing. And then when we have new people work with us, they don't understand the code. Now, if you went and built that or built functions in Excel to help them skip the VBA, you'd probably miss the point, because in many cases, people are using VBA because they're using Excel when they shouldn't be using Excel. And what they really need is a database. And so the better solution there would be to say, okay, people are struggling with managing their data. Who cares about Excel? Excel's got very little to do with it. They need a way for them to create better databases, but they don't have any training in SQL or data engineering or anything like that. So a solution might be, okay, we've got an AI-based product where we have an LLM that interfaces with the SQL database, where you just say in human language what you want, and it will just do it for you. And that might be, these days,
the best solution.
Yeah, a much better solution. And Databricks are already doing that kind of thing now. I'm not talking about anything particularly revolutionary right now, but that's what we're talking about. So make sure you're listening to their problems, their unmet needs, and you're finding problems where they really, really struggle and they would pay top dollar for you to fix it. So if you tell them, hey, I can solve this problem for you, would you give me an hour of your time next week? And they say, look, I'm busy and I don't really care. It's probably not a problem worth solving. There needs to be a certain level of appetite. So that's the first part. But then after that, what you need to do is you need to work. And in my experience working at reasonably large companies, I'll work with designers and engineers. And what we're trying to do once we've figured out the problem we want to solve is, how do we make sure that we find a solution that actually solves that problem and gets all the key valuable parts of that problem solved? Because sometimes that problem they give you is, it might as well be like, can you create my own internet for me? That's not going to happen. But there might be some small part of that is really, really important. So you want to make sure you really hone in on that. The other problem is, how do you make sure it's usable? So you might find a solution, it's super cool, super elegant, super scalable, but only 5% of people can figure it out, and those people could pretty much build it themselves. So you've pretty much completely stuffed up the usability side of it. Then the other problem then is feasibility. So you want to make sure that you can actually build it in a reasonable period of time. And then the last thing is viability, which could be stuff like not cannibalizing your internal products if you're a large company, or just not breaking the law, not doing stuff that's morally questionable. And where people get stuck here is they sometimes go through a bit of a waterfall process. So waterfall discovery, where you say, okay, here's some designs, and then here's the requirements, here's the designs, here's the estimates, now here's the project plan. And that, to me, is the worst way to do it, because what you've basically done is you've assumed that the designer knows feasibility, which they pretty much never do. You've assumed that the product manager knows usability. You've basically just never got everyone in a room. So what you want to do is really just go through as many iterations as you can, where you try and fully solve the problem as a team, all of you together. And the more of those iterations you can go through, the closer you'll get to a solution that's about right. And at that point, you'll probably have something close to product market fit. That's my big rant about, that's me just giving it all in one go, but happy to dive into any parts of that if you'd like.
So that's very interesting, because what I understood is, like, when you want to find a product market fit, the first thing is you can go to the customers, you can ask them what their problems are, but then you have to be very careful, because they may say a lot of problems, but those problems may not necessarily translate into good product ideas, because what you have to understand is not the solutions they are suggesting, hey, I want this, but their pain problems. You understand what they're going through, where they are getting stuck, and then you kind of address those pain problems and come up with product ideas all by yourself, because they may not be in the position where they can imagine what kind of product will actually solve their problems. Very interesting. And then you also mentioned that, of course, after doing this, you have to find out whether the product that you are going to build is feasible. That is, again, the cost picture. If you build something which is like, the return on investment is not correct, ROI is not there on that product, you are spending way too much to build a product, and when you are going to sell it, will not get that particular returns, then again, there is no point building that product. And the last thing I think you mentioned is viability, that you shouldn't end up cannibalizing your own products or some other features from some. Let's say you have a big product which is selling really good, and you build a small product which starts cannibalizing this big product. It may kind of become counterproductive, right? The whole exercise of finding the product market fit, because you found the correct product, but probably at the cost of another product which was a hit for you already.
Yeah. I mean, you're solving the
Very
problem that people don't want to pay for your expensive products. You will build them a cheaper one where they can save money, which is not good for your business. And I think one thing that's important there is, at any point in time in this whole process, you could find that you need to go back to the drawing board. You might find a problem that is really difficult for people where they have an unmet need. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can solve that for them, it would be highly valuable. And then you come up with
Sure.
a way that you could solve it. And then you realize from a technology perspective, there's just no way to do this. Or there is no way where you can make the unit economics work, where it'll always cost like $10 a user per day at the cheapest, no
Mm.
matter what you do. And people aren't willing to spend more than $10 a month.
Right.
You're out of luck. That's just not going to work. So either you find a different solution for it, or maybe this is the reason why there is no product, in which case you're in
Sure.
trouble. So that's why I say
Bec-
product market fit is hard, because you have to find the right problem, and then you have to
Right.
find a problem that has a viable business model around it with the solution you come up with. And that's where
Sure.
things can get pretty hard.
Okay, I can start imagining already the difficulties surrounding this exploration because, first of all, you know, you have to go to a customer, make all this communication, and then at the end of the day, you may realize that even though you have found a product market fit, the business doesn't really is not going to support it because numbers will not kind of justify all this effort. That's very interesting.
Well, that's an interesting thing you mentioned, though, as well, because if you think it's a really good opportunity, but the business doesn't, because they don't think that it's financially viable for the business, well, I mean, you've just defined product market fit poorly. You've just basically said product market fit is a product that solves a problem I like, that I think is good, but actually doesn't make money for the. I mean, it's product market
Okay.
fit, not problem solution fit, which is just solving a problem, making sure it works. Um, and if you can't show really strong evidence,
Mhm.
and this is where things get really hard, especially in
Okay.
enterprise organizations, convincing people that the big idea that you have is the right one is
Okay.
a difficult is a difficult endeavor. It gets messy. There's lots of conversations that go in circles. You have to be more. It's not about being a perfect communicator where everyone just loves it. It's about being resilient and knowing that you'll have a bunch of people say no before you get a yes at the end, and you have to be
Okay.
okay with that. But then you also have to work really, really hard. Anyway, I can get into that in a bit.